Okay, so we looked at the pre-scientific, scientific, post-scientific periods in the history of psychology, the modern period. Well, there's several perspectives or at this time, but the most prevalent and most influential ones are the ones we're going to talk about, which are behaviorism, Gestalt, psychoanalysis, and cognitive perspective. In late 19th century, 70s and 80s, as you have seen, structuralism was very popular, and that was the first school of thought. And other schools came as alternative to structuralism. The opposition to structuralism was mainly because of the methodology Wundt adopted, which was introspection. And the idea then was introspection cannot be an objective way of studying human behavior. People started calling whoever was interested in mental processes as a mentalist. So then people were interested in non-mental mentalist constructs. Behaviorism was motivated by the idea of only studying things that you can observe objectively. So that was the idea of behaviorism. Watson's idea was to make psychology a science of external behavior. While Watson founded behaviorism, the credit of popularizing it goes to B.F. Skinner, who is known for his Skinner box. Skinner is known for operant conditioning. It's about rewards and punishment. You can teach any organism, including humans, to repeat a behavior by rewarding it. So he was able to teach pigeons complex behaviors through changes in the environment. Parallelly at that time, especially in Germany, there was another school of thought called Gestalt. Wertheimer is known for Gestalt psychology. Keep in mind, this came as an alternative to structuralism, where structuralists were interested in studying the structure of the conscious experience. What Wertheimer thought was knowing the structure, dividing the whole into components is not what our mind does. Our mind actually puts together components to give us an experience that is beyond the individual pieces. He was intrigued by apparent motion. Apparent motion is when you feel motion when there isn't one. For example, let's say you're driving a car, you park the car, but you feel you're moving forward. Only later you realize that it's because the car next to you is actually pulling back. According to Wertheimer, these are illusions. These illusions are not tricks. The brain is using a strategy to organize otherwise ambiguous information so it can perceive it. The mind assembles things in a way that you can perceive it. Well-known phrase here is the whole is greater than its parts. In this picture, if I ask you what you see, typically you see three circles and triangle. In fact, there isn't any triangle here. You can say the Pac-Man kind of things, but there's no real triangle here. But you see the triangle. The idea here is that your experience of this triangle is greater than its components, which aren't triangles. And understanding how our mind does this is what the topic of the field was of Gestalt psychology. Coming to the third field, which was popular at the same time as behaviorism, was a psychoanalysis. And if there is one psychologist who's popular, that would be Sigmund Freud. He founded psychoanalysis. Well, he was a physician, so an Austrian doctor who was interested in treating patients. According to him, again, we'll talk more about him later, our mind has two components to it, and one is the conscious, which you're aware of, the other is subconscious, which you're unaware of. Uses the tip of the iceberg analogy to suggest that what you're conscious is only the tip of the iceberg, and which is only 1/7 of the size of the iceberg. The subconscious part that you're unaware of is the rest of the iceberg, which is 6/7 of the iceberg, meaning that you're only aware of a part of your mind. There is a lot that you're not aware of. So our covert behaviors have some ulterior motives specific to sex and aggression. I was also interested in the idea that our childhood experiences affect our later behavior. Well, that brings us to the last modern perspective, the cognitive perspective. Now, before we talk about cognitive perspective, I just want to give you a bigger picture. If you look at structuralism, behaviorism, and cognitive, it starts with structuralism, then there is behaviorism. Then the field bounced back with a combined ideas like what is good from structuralism, behaviorism, it took it and incorporated in itself by taking what is good in both the perspectives and developed what is called cognitive perspective. If you look at this, the main difference between structural and behaviorism is the topic and the method. The topic for structuralists was a mental processes in a way, although they might not have termed that as a mental process, but studying something that you can see. For behaviors, on the other hand, the topic is only observable behavior, and the methodology used was observation. What cognitive psychology did is it took the things that are good in each. In other words, cognitive psychology studied both external behavior and internal behavior, like structuralists, but they adopted objective ways of observation. Now, you may ask, how can you study something you can't see? Well, you later realize when you talk about cognitive psychology in detail that the difference of software and hardware, the fact that you cannot see a programming, but still you can create programs that run computers, give this idea that just because you can't see programming doesn't mean programming doesn't exist. In other words, just because you can't see mental activities does not mean that it doesn't exist. We still know how to create these programs. In other words, we can learn about mental processes even though we can't observe them. The basic assumptions of cognitive perspective are that mental processes do exist, that we can objectively study mental processes. These were the two major objections that behaviorists have against structuralists. What cognitive psychologists say is that they do exist, and you can adopt objective measures to study these. The third assumption of cognitive psychology is that humans they receive um, process and send information. They use the word informivores. Herbivore, you eat plants. Carnivore, eat animals. Similar to that, it's farmivores here, suggesting that we are information seeking and processing organisms. And that's what IPS is, information processing systems. As you've seen in the big picture, we looked at a few of those mental processes, such as sensation, attention, perception.